Today's episode of the Behind the Mic podcast is brought to you by Mental Minute Success Coaching. Do you want to improve and accomplish more in life? Do you want to gain clarity and focus? Well, Mental Minute Success Coaching designs a life, performance, and clears pathways that strengthen emotional skills, boost motivation, and promotes real change for accomplishing your goals. So why wait? Make every minute count by visiting mentalminutes.com now to invest in your success. Mental Minute Success Coaching is a custom creative program that meets all individual needs. Your social, emotional, academic, athletic, and performance life will rise to new heights and change your pattern of success in life forever. Get started now at mentalminutes.com and invest in your success. That's mentalminutes.com. Episode number 149 of the Behind the Mic podcast, Brad Dalius. You can follow me across social media. Same name, it's Dalius. Two great guests on tap for today's podcast. I can't wait to chat with these two guys. First off, we'll talk with Paul Boye. He is a contributor to SB Nation's The Good Fight blog. All things Philadelphia Phillies-wise. We're going to talk with Paul about the Bryce Harper addition, what that means for this Phillies team, the 2019 version of them. Look, he's going to be a Philly for not just 2019, not just 2020, but for the next 13 seasons. Of course, no opt-out in that agreement that his agent Scott Boras was able to work for his client there in Philadelphia. So lots to get to with Paul. You can follow him on Twitter at Paul_Boye. That's the first half of the podcast today. After Paul, we'll get into a little UCLA talk because lots going on with both the basketball program, also the football program, spring practice starting up earlier this week over in Westwood in Los Angeles. And it looks like they finally got some clear, dry conditions to actually go out there and practice with. Chip Kelly and company their first week here in the spring session. I was about ready to build an ark, whatever, you name it out here. The rain in Los Angeles is crazy. They've gotten the most rain here in the month of March since I think I saw the year 1888. It's the most rain they've had in 1 month here in the month of March. Crazy, but finally dry now on this Thursday, and hopefully the weekend it stays dry as well. I'm headed to Miami this weekend for a little R&R, so it's gonna warm up a little bit. The temperatures have not been freezing compared to the East Coast, but at the same time, not your typical LA weather. So looking forward to chatting with Joe. He is the managing editor at BruinsNation.com. You can follow Joe at Joe Piechowski on Twitter. That's Piechowski. Joe, a good friend of the show. We've talked with him a lot over the past 6 months or so when we were over on KABC Radio. He was a regular contributor, regular call-in here to the program. So a very, very good friend of the show, Joe Piechowski, will join us the second half of the podcast today. A lot's going on here in the world of sports. The latest with the Broncos is that they're trading Case Keenum to the Redskins. What does that mean for Alex Smith, who, of course, is still recovering from that leg injury, all the surgeries he had in the last couple of months? The Broncos, of course, recently acquiring Joe Flacco, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens. We talked about that a couple episodes ago. What does it mean for the Broncos as an organization going forward? And lots going on with them right now as we get into almost the start of the NFL free agency period, March 13th coming up. And the big note so far is that it came out earlier this week. The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to sign Nick Foles. They're going to make Nick Foles the starting quarterback of this team for 2019. They think they can go all in. They think they're just one player away, of course, that being the most position in all of sports, the quarterback position. Nick Foles will have an opportunity to showcase, not just on a reoccurring basis, but on a weekly basis, on a regular week in, week out basis, how well he plays as a starting quarterback in this league. We haven't seen him having that title. We've seen him in spurts in Philadelphia, of course, the Super Bowl run, everyone knows about that, the playoffs this past year as well, but we haven't seen him really a full 16-game slate in a very, very long time. So that looks like it's going to be the first shoe to drop when free agency officially begins on March the 13th. That's the football news today. You might have saw Hall of Famer Tom Seager diagnosed with dementia. That came across the airwaves just a little while ago. Tough news there. It's always difficult when We see former athletes, former coaches, former assistants, whenever they're diagnosed with an illness. It's very, very tough, and I'm sure a lot of people will rally around Tom, and we'll send him and his family a lot of good thoughts and prayers here from the program of Behind the Mic. College basketball, as I talked about, March Madness is right around the corner. Going to get into a whole bunch of that stuff with Joe Piechowski, but how great is March Madness, by the way? We kind of take a step back in the fact that it is amazing how you talk with anyone this time of year. Yeah, you got March Madness, got the brackets coming out soon, Selection Sunday coming up on March 17th. Are you going to watch? You're going to fill out a bracket? Oh, yeah, I'll fill out a bracket. Do you watch basketball on a regular basis? No, not really, but I'll fill out a bracket. Those are the type of conversations I have with people all the time outside of the sports world, people who aren't as dialed in as we are on a regular basis to what's going on. It's become a family tradition for a lot of families out there. I know from my family, we all get into filling out the brackets on a recurring basis, year in and year out. It's a lot of fun. Even if you aren't putting money in and playing for cash, it's still a lot of fun, and it creates a lot of great memories for really years to come. Great way for people to bond and get together this time of year to rally around all the teams who are vying to cut down the nets ultimately. And this year, cut down the nets in chilly Minnesota. I can attest it is cold there, freezing, but it's a really nice stadium. US Bank Stadium is really nice. I think they're going to play great host to the Final Four coming up at the beginning of April. So we look forward to that. As far as the NBA goes, we know LeBron last night surpassed Michael Jordan for most points as he continues to climb the ranks on the NBA all-time scoring list. He's in striking distance now of Kobe, of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and it is amazing how LeBron, I heard a lot of the talk today about how he's been able to surpass so many different records. At the end of the day, he's probably going to have the most checked off boxes as you possibly can have in the game of basketball. Most points, assists, rebounds, shots blocked. He will check off the boxes in so many different categories, but does that make him the greatest player of all time? I don't think it does. I don't think it does. I think you have to put a lot of stock in what he's been able to do. It's impressive. It's really unprecedented. But when you compare to other players and other generations and other decades, LeBron is a top 5 player all time. He will go down in that sense. And he should be commended for things he has done off the basketball court as well. Coming from Akron, Ohio, being raised by a single mother, becoming a businessman who, when I look at LeBron today, I look at him as a businessman who has been very successful and who really has elevated himself past just being LeBron James, the basketball player. He has gone way past that, in my estimation. He's LeBron James, the entertainer, LeBron James, the businessman, like I said before, and really, thirdly, I think of him as LeBron James, the basketball player who happens to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. That's kind of the pecking order at this point in time. It's just the beginning of March. There's more of LeBron to come, obviously, and depending on how this Lakers season finishes, we will get into a whole lot more with LeBron, and we have really all summer to talk about, especially if the Lakers don't make the postseason. LeBron passing Jordan points-wise, where does he stand, et cetera, in really the pecking order of all-time great players. We have plenty of time to talk about that. But where the Lakers are right now as a team, as we know, has just become a complete and utter disaster. Luke Walton looks like he's going to be gone at the end of the season. There's going to be a whole lot of turnover on that roster. I said it when LeBron James first came to LA. It's not about winning championships for him. Although he might come off here and there as surprised as where this organization is at right now with him on the team. Yes, he's been injured for a portion of the season, but he's been there. I think he thought at the very least he'd be able to put an imprint on what they've been able to do. It hasn't worked out here in year one of the 4-year deal he signed last summer. I said from the very beginning, it's not about winning championships. If he can win just one title during his tenure in LA, that's his best argument to say, look, All time in the finals, I have a losing record. Right now, he's 3-6. If he can win one more, obviously he'd be 4-6 in 10 appearances. I don't have the best record compared to the Jordans, the Wilts of the world, the Bill Russells, who've won the most championships. But I can say I've won in 3 different places, ultimately, if I'm able to win here just one championship in LA. That still has to be the same mindset for him. I know he's disappointed this Lakers season has not gone as planned, but he knew what he was getting into when he signed on the dotted line. He knew what he was getting into with this situation. They weren't going to win the championship this year. They weren't going to contend with Golden State. They were hoping to punch their ticket to the postseason, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And the bigger story right now, I think, for the NBA is how it looks like if this holds true, they're not going to have LeBron for the playoffs. No LA market, no New York market once again for the NBA playoffs. It's a bad look for the NBA, and it's something that they really have to try and find a way to get these franchises back. I hate to put it in those terms, to get these franchises back into at least somewhat of a competitive spirit. The Knicks have been an utter disaster. They're right up there with the Lakers. And right now you have some talk about a whole bunch of different guys who they don't have a problem playing in smaller markets. Look at Giannis Antetokounmpo with the Milwaukee Bucks. Milwaukee is thriving in the Eastern Conference this season. That's just one example. Paul George in OKC. Big-time superstars want to go to the smaller markets and build up the stock that way. It's a bucking of the trend from the past. That's how it's going here at the moment. It's not good news for the Lakers and the Knicks, who at this point, I don't think are going to be able to recruit any big-time free agents to come their way here this summer. That's tough uphill sledding for Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka out here in LA in the front office. The same thing goes for Dolan and company in New York. But I think that's what they're faced with right now in the year of 2019 in the NBA. We're just getting started here on the Behind the Mic podcast. We do these every so often, trying to go more on a weekly basis coming up in the next couple of weeks, but we try and put these out multiple times a month. Once again, 2 great guests coming your way today. A little baseball talk on the other side. We'll get into it with Paul Boye. He's a contributor for SB Nation's The Good Fight blog. Check it out. All the good stuff they're doing there on SB Nation. And also later on from SB Nation, Joe Piechowski, managing editor of BruinsNation.com, will join us to talk a little UCLA basketball and football spring practice as well as we get into it here on this Tuesday, March the 7th. We take a break. We come back with Paul Boye right after this. Paul Boye joining us now here on Behind the Mic from SB Nation's The Good Fight blog. Paul, great to have you on the show today. How are things going?
Brad, thank you so much. Good afternoon to you. It's a really exciting time. You know, we're less than 48 hours away from Bryce Harper finally making his spring debut down in Clearwater, and I think you can feel it in just about everybody you talk to. It's a really exciting time.
When did the reality actually set in that he was going to sign with the Phillies after Phillies brass had made the trip out to Las Vegas to really try and court him very heavily there at the end? And, you know, ultimately he's able to put on the pinstripes as far as the red and white are concerned. But, yeah, just like the reality as far as what you've been able to gauge there in the city of Philadelphia and beyond that, Bryce Harper is actually going to be a Philly for not just 2019, not just 2020, but beyond for a very long time.
Yeah, he's going to be around for a little while. The reality is, for me at least, still hitting me in waves. You know, it was a roller coaster week, the week when he signed. I remember I went on SB Nation Radio the weekend before he signed, and I was feeling great. I was riding high. I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because everything at that point was pointing toward this being an inevitability. And then early on in the week, we start hearing these whispers come out about, maybe things aren't as signed, sealed, and delivered as we think. Maybe the Giants and Dodgers are really back in it. And then Thursday comes around and they finally seal the deal. So it was a wild back and forth. But even as that was going on, it didn't actually start to feel real until he got off the jet, shook hands with the owner, John Middleton, and Matt Klentak. And then the next wave was, when we saw him in uniform taking promo pictures. And now the next wave over the last couple of days has been his taking hacks in sim games. It's starting to hit slowly and in stages, and I feel like it's going to hit all over again once Saturday rolls around and he actually steps in the box and starts taking some spring training swings.
Were you surprised that there was no opt-out in the agreement? For 13 years, he's basically committing to Philadelphia for the rest of his career. We all know that at this point. But the fact that the Phillies were able to negotiate it without an opt-out, and it just seemed a little surprising maybe initially when you first saw the report came out of what the contract, all the details of it were concerned. Were you surprised, though, about that part of it?
I started off feeling a little surprised just because the recent trend with superstars has been to give them that flexibility. That's what they want. That's something that they negotiate. That's a power that they can wield where if something goes wrong or if they outperform their contract and want to seek a new one, that they can opt out. We've seen it a lot. We've seen it from, CC Sabathia years ago all the way up through David Price and even Manny Machado not too long before Harper signed. So initially it was a surprise to me, but then as Harper and Phillies ownership and management began to explain, that part of the negotiations, it began to make sense. And we began to look at Harper as something that bucks the trend, somebody who goes against the stereotype. He said he wants to find a place where he can basically finish out his career. He didn't want a no-trade clause. He did want the no-trade clause. He didn't want the opt-out. He wanted to put down roots, as he said. This was as much a family decision as it was a baseball decision. Now, obviously, $330 million from the baseball team will help that part of the equation. But the fact that he was considering location and family so much in this and explaining that as a main driver behind not taking this opt-out as part of his contract, it was logical. Even if it wasn't something we were necessarily thinking about right off the gate or expecting him to take, hearing them explain it that way really made it seem reasonable, and it's become far less surprising the more I think about it.
Harper and Machado, obviously the two biggest offensive targets this Major League Baseball free agency period, obviously this offseason, and the Phillies get Harper, the Padres get Machado. How much stock do you actually put in the Philly fan base as far as persuading the ownership group and the front office of the Phillies to really go after Harper instead of Machado? We heard those reports come out here recently. What's your take on that one?
I thought that was interesting, and it was nice to see that the people who are running the show are paying attention that way.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't think they really made their decision based off of what the fans wanted that way. I think they were going to do their best to make the right baseball move. If they didn't value Manny Machado at 10 years and $300 million, then, okay, then they must value Bryce Harper more because they have all this money. They have the need for one of these superstars. We all just assumed they were going to go after one of them. And we figured, okay, Machado's off the board. Now they can put their resources and their power back behind Harper. This, that, and the other thing, all the roller coasters with the rumors, the rest is history. In terms of actually thinking the fans persuaded them to go harder toward one or the other, I don't really buy into that too much. I think in the back of their minds, they probably knew, they had to have known, that if they didn't land either of these guys, that there was going to be hell to pay from the fan base. I mean, Philadelphia fans are not going to let that slide. They are not going to let something like that go. After years of waiting, years of bad baseball, the team setting itself up to land one of these guys and actually pay them all of this money, then the owner coming out in a press conference and saying, yes, we could possibly spend, quote, stupid money, which we heard all offseason, and then for them to come up empty-handed at the end of that, that was not going to fly. There was probably pressure. They probably felt it. I don't think the fans pushing one way or the other really affected their preference all that much in the end. I think they just knew they had to get one of these guys.
We're talking with Paul Boye from SB Nation's The Good Fight blog in the greater Philadelphia area. They're talking about Bryce Harper, of course, being a Philly here coming up for 2019 and well beyond. What does it mean for the team as a whole, though, going forward now, obviously, Paul, for 2019 and this season coming up? And I'm curious to get your take on, was it always the plan from day one for the Phillies to go all in here in 2019 and make a big splash in free agency, as they've done now, obviously, with Harper, Andrew McCutchen, JT Realmuto, acquiring him from the Marlins at catcher, really solidifying Aaron Nola at the top of that rotation? Was that the plan all along to go in specifically this year, or did it kind of just evolve that way?
I think it's a little bit of both. I'm sure, as far as 2-3 years out, this regime, when they took over, they had their eyes on this offseason. Now, obviously, it didn't become the mega offseason that some people thought it might be. Clayton Kershaw, Josh Donaldson, those they're still getting money, but they're not quite at the level they were just a couple of years ago. Jose Fernandez, of course, tragically passed away before he would have been a free agent this winter as well. So they were probably planning on having some options to land a superstar, to potentially build a team around a mega import. This was probably part of their plans. I think they're fortunate that they had two options actually get to free agency in Harper and Machado of that caliber. I think the Realmuto trade kind of fell into their lap. They weren't really considered a front runner in those negotiations until basically the 11th hour when they swooped in and were willing to include Sixto Sanchez in the package on the way back. They, swooped right in and grabbed Andrew McCutchen at the outset of free agency, which was great. But that didn't really impact their pursuit of any of the other superstars. That was just something that probably fit into more of their short-term vision. I think this was a combination of, yes, a well-executed long-term plan, but also seizing the opportunities put in front of them. They worked with the players that were available to actually bring them in and improve the team where they needed to be improved, making more than marginal improvements in some areas, and really coming together to form a squad that really is significantly better than they were just even last year.
Yeah, about a 500 ball club, obviously, in 2018, 80 and 82. We know now with Harper coming on, he's going to hit a lot of balls out of the ballpark at Citizens Bank Park, obviously there in Philly. We know McCutchen, Stu, has a lot of game left in his offensive prowess as well. I think probably maybe the biggest concern with this team right now is the pitching rotation depth outside of Nola. What's your take on that one?
Yeah, you won't find many people outside Philadelphia who are all that high on the 3 through 5 in the Phillies rotation. And there are probably a few that are even wondering how much Jake Arrieta has left in the tank. I like what I saw out of Arrieta in his first start in spring early this week. Obviously, it's early spring, so you can only take so much from that. I think having a full spring training and rehab from the leg injury that was bothering him toward the end of last year should help him. I don't know if we're going to see, 2015 Cy Young winner Jake Arrieta come out, but he should be a valuable guy in the rotation. Beyond him, I am a huge fan of Nick Pivetta. He has not put up the numbers to date that would really make you think, oh yeah, this is a guy you can count on. He's a number 3 right out of the gate. I think he's due for a big year. He's got electric stuff, throws mid to high 90s, great curveball, working on a changeup to face lefties. I think he's due for a big year. Beyond him, there's a lot of depth. You're not necessarily looking at a ton of impact with guys like Vince Velasquez, Zach Eflin, deeper 40-man options like Cole Irvin, Jojo Romero, Enyel De Los Santos. They're all viable major league arms, which helps, but I don't think there's really an ace buried in there. Now, if you're talking about adding Dallas Keuchel, at the same time, I don't know how much Dallas Keuchel has left in the tank.
Well, it's funny you bring him up because obviously he's still floating out there, and some reports have come out recently saying that potentially the Astros, Stu, could be linked to maybe being the front runner as far as anybody who's going to re-sign him. Why hasn't he been signed yet?
That's a great question. I think even if he is on the downside of his career, that he's still a valuable guy who can pitch a lot of innings. He can work with just about any staff, honestly. He's somebody who should be signed. I'm not sure what the negotiations are like at this point. Maybe he does end up going back to the Astros. I'm a little surprised the Yankees aren't dipping their toes in the water given the injuries that they have. There shouldn't be a shortage of a market for a guy like this, especially this deep into spring training. I wish I had a better answer. I really have no idea why he's still out there.
Is it possible we're going to see a shift from obviously the American League East, specifically that division has gotten so many headlines over the last couple of recent years. Red Sox won the World Series last year. The Yankees are always in the mix. The Orioles have been horrible. Obviously, we know that one. And Tampa, not so good either. But the Yankees and the Red Sox steal a lot of headlines. I think we would all agree on that one. Are we going to see the National League East get more of that attention now with a big guy, big-time free agent like Harper joining them in the outfield? Are we going to see more of the National League East? We know about the Braves, how well they played last year. A lot of people like Atlanta to play really good baseball again here in 2019. The Mets should be good, maybe not great here this season coming up. What are your thoughts on as far as the division and how it kind of stacks up to some of the other divisions in baseball?
I think what you're going to see out of the NL East is a dogfight. You're not going to see a team, I don't think, emerge with 100, 105 wins and run away with this division. Because like you were just talking about, there are 4 very good teams in this division and 1 not great team in this division. What separates the NL East from the AL East is that Boston and New York are really, really deep. They're probably almost certainly better than any of the 4 best teams in the NL East, although I'm sure you could get into a longer argument about that. But once you get past them in the AL East, the competition is a little bit weaker, let's put it that way. So there are more opportunities for those 2 teams to beat up on those lower-end teams and pile up more wins. So you'll probably see more wins out of the AL East winner. The NL East is going to be so tough, I think, that the division winner might only have 87 or 88 wins just because these top 4 teams are going to go at it so hard with one another. They're all very close in skill level, at least on paper. I really think it's going to come down to the wire. These 4 teams could all be in the mix to take the division really into September. I don't see any reason why not.
With the moves the Phillies have made, how many more wins do you give them this year compared to last year?
Well, the Harper edition being the biggest one of them all, I really think 88, 89 wins is well within reach. Again, accounting for how tough this division is going to be. They could push 90 if things go right. They get a couple good breaks here and there. 90 is not out of the question. I think mid to high 80s is where we're looking at right now. So, yeah, probably 88, 89 wins is where I'd say.
What's the biggest concern for the game right now as far as Major League Baseball, just honing on them, the league overall specifically right now, heading into this season? We know they're going to add a pitch clock here that's going to be implemented. We already know there's been a lot of talk about that to begin with here in spring training. What do you see as maybe the biggest concern for baseball heading into this 2019 campaign?
I think they need to find a better way to pay their minor leaguers. The minor league systems are so important to the future health of Major League Baseball that you can't really afford to have guys only getting $1,000 a month or whatever it is at the lower levels for too much longer. It's fair to wonder if the minor league system and the pay scales on going from level to level is what cost Major League Baseball Kyler Murray, and you don't want to run yourself into these situations in the future where because you can't pay the future of your game long enough to actually make it to the majors, after they spend 3, 4, 5 years down in the minors, you don't want that to be a deterrent. You want to make sure that these guys are taken care of, that they're thought about, and that they're accounted for when the next collective bargaining agreement is up for discussion. It's really just critical. They need to find a way to take care of these guys better.
Are you in favor of the National League adopting the DH?
Ooh. For a long time, I was not. I thought that there was something nice to the separation between the leagues, the AL having this DH, the NL not having that, and then having to work with double switches and all of these things. As I've gotten older and over the last few years, I've really kind of become more indifferent toward it. I am not opposed to it the way I used to be. I think it would take a burden off of managers in a way that would let them focus more on maintaining a clubhouse, being more focused on their pitchers' workload without having to worry about how they're going to juggle their lineup in a corresponding move. I can understand how old school minds would, not be okay with something like this because it's the way the game has always been played. But if it's something that the players end up wanting and the league ends up being okay with, I am absolutely not opposed to it. And I think we could see it probably within the next few years.
He's Paul Boye. Follow him on Twitter at Paul_Boye. Of course, once again, calling in from SB Nation's The Good Fight blog. Real quick, Paul, before we let you go, give us maybe 1 or 2 players who are kind of flying under the radar this spring, who we should really pay attention to before the season begins.
Well, on the Phillies, I'd have to say that, Nick Pivetta is the guy to look out for in case you haven't really latched your wagon onto that hype train. Now's the time to do that. Apart from that, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the outfield situation shapes out for the Phils now that they've added Harper and essentially have a logjam out there. They have 7 outfielders on the 40-man roster in camp right now. They're not going to carry 7 on opening day. We know Harper is going to be there. We know McCutcheon's going to be there. Injury issues are something to keep an eye on for Odubel Herrera. Roman Quinn, same thing, but if he can stay healthy, he's a guy to keep an eye on. And Aaron Altair, a personal favorite of mine who had a very subpar 2018, is out of options. And if he doesn't make this team, he's going to go on waivers. Somebody's going to pick him up. These are interesting battles. We don't know how they're shaking out just yet since it's so early in spring. But like I said, Phillies can't carry 7 outfielders, so somebody's going to go. And I think somebody's going to end up picking up a nice piece, whoever becomes the odd man.
Opening day right around the corner. Paul, we thank you for your time, man. Definitely appreciate the insights, and we're looking forward to really following this Phillies team along with a whole bunch of other teams here. It should be an exciting 2019 coming up. Thanks so much.
Brad, thanks so much for having me.
Joe Piechowski joining us now, the managing editor at BruinsNation.com, talking about UCLA and how this team is faring as the regular season starts to come to a close. Conference tournament beginning next week, of course. Just a couple of games left here. And, Joe, I got to tell you right now, I mean, it looks like the Bruins are playing their best basketball really all season. Does that sound about right?
That does actually sound about right. In fact, at this point, UCLA controls their own destiny for their seed in the Pac-12 tournament next week. If they can beat both Colorado tonight and Utah on Saturday, they should have either the 3rd or 4th seed, which will get them a bye next week, and they won't have to play in the first round.
Winners of their last 4 out of 5 and mainly healthy overall. I think maybe Prince Ali is the only exception on the team. And what is the status of him? Are they going to get him back at all for the remainder of the season?
Well, that might be tough because he's got plantar fasciitis, and that can be pretty painful. So that remains to be seen whether or not he'll be back at all this season. But they've done all right without him. David Singleton's been starting, and that's worked out really well for Murray Bartow and the rest of the team.
Once the conference tournament starts next week, if they do get that bye, like you had mentioned there before, the possibility of it, do they realistically have a shot, do you think, to run the table and win this conference tournament? They're probably going to need to do so in order to get the automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. What's your take on that?
Yeah, if they don't win the tournament, the Pac-12 tournament, then they're going to be hard pressed to get into to the NCAA tournament, which is why getting that first round bye is so important, because it means that they don't have to play 3 days in a row. They would just play 2 days in a row, and that would make it a whole lot easier for them to get to the championship game, and then it's a little bit of a hope and a prayer, assuming that they end up having to play Washington at some point, that they can go ahead and advance.
You mentioned Murray Bartow, of course, the interim head coach here for the UCLA basketball team. What is the update as far as the permanent head coach, the next head coach of this team is concerned? Is there any truth to the rumor that they may be targeting Matt Painter at Purdue?
That's a new one. I hadn't heard that one before. It's something where the search has been extremely, extremely quiet. I mean, obviously, as soon as Steve Alford was fired back at the end of December and the calendar switched over to January, everybody was jumping in with possibilities as to who could replace him. But really, ever since then, there hasn't been a whole lot of chatter going on. And so your guess is as good as mine at this point. I hadn't heard Matt Painter from Purdue as a possibility. Personally, I don't think that he's done well enough to merit that that kind of a promotion. Frankly, I think UCLA needs to be looking more at the home run hires, guys like Tony Bennett at Virginia. Or possibly trying to convince Jay Wright at Villanova to make the move out to Westwood. But I think those are the types of guys that they should be going after. I've personally always been a favorite of Greg Marshall at Wichita State, but they're really going to have to back up the Brinks truck for him, because the challenge with getting Greg Marshall is that the Koch brothers have paid him very, very well.
Do you think they'll ultimately hire somebody who's currently in college, or do you think there's still an outside chance they could get an NBA head coach?
Like I say, it's been so quiet. I don't think
Anything's
anybody
possible,
really
yeah.
truly knows, unless you're on the committee, and the committee's only three guys. It's senior associate athletic director Josh Rebholz. It's Golden State Warriors GM Bob Myers, and it's another administrator in the athletic department who's got a lot. Who was the guy, and his name's going to escape me right now, of course. But he was the guy was essentially responsible for getting the Hangzhou 3 out of China. I forget his last name. His first name's Chris. Those are the three guys who ultimately are leading the search, and really nobody else really has any true knowledge about it, because those guys are not saying anything to anybody. It's something where at some point they'll just be almost like when the Catholic Church selects a new pope. There'll be a puff of white smoke coming up out of the Morgan Center or something, and we'll have a new basketball head coach, I guess.
I'm going to be on the lookout for that one, Joe, if that is the case. I'm going to be on the lookout for some white smoke, if you will, coming from the campus there over at UCLA. That would be something to take in for sure. That'd be trending everywhere. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How about this one? How about this one for a curveball? What if this team does run the table here, they win the Pac-12 tournament, get into the NCAAs, win a game or two, let's say, is it possible that the next head coach could be Murray Bartow?
In order to get the job permanently, Murray Bartow has to not just run the table in the Pac-12 in the season and the conference tournament. Murray Bartow's got to run the table in the NCAA tournament. So if Murray Bartow brings the championship home to Westwood somehow, some way this year, great. He can have the job. But frankly, I've listened to some of his press conferences, and at times he's just sounded clueless. So I don't think that's gonna be very likely. Getting in and winning a game or maybe even two would totally exceed expectations, but it's not going to be good enough to get him the job permanently. I mean, the knock on Steve Alford was one of the knocks on Steve Alford was that he never advanced past the Sweet 16. So for Murray Bartow to tear off that interim tag, he's going to have to do something a lot better than get to the Sweet 16 to do it.
We're talking with Joe Piechowski, managing editor over at BruinsNation.com. Let's kind of go around college basketball and hit on a couple different big topics right now, Joe, if that's cool with you. And let's start first with Jim Boeheim at Syracuse. The word came out today that he was officially cleared of any wrongdoing, of course, in the vehicular fatality that occurred there when he was behind the wheel, and just a crazy scene there on one of the interstates in upstate New York in the Syracuse area. What are your thoughts on this really big, unfortunate event that occurred recently and the effect that it's maybe had on Boeheim and Syracuse?
Well, I think it's absolutely tragic. I mean, unfortunately, he's going to have to live with that, the rest of his life, and it is what it is. But at the same time, I mean, if they've cleared him, then then there's no wrongdoing, obviously, in this situation. But I think at some point, they had Washington's head coach as the coach in waiting for quite a while. I don't necessarily think that that'll cause the end of the Boeheim era at Syracuse, but I don't think I think we're closer to the end of the Boeheim era than we are to the start of the Boeheim era. That's obvious. He's getting up there in age, and he's gonna retire at some point. But I don't necessarily think that this is going to cause that.
As far as any ramifications with the players and it's such a crazy thing that honestly it can happen to anybody. I know through personal experience driving, especially when I first started out driving, these type of things can happen even if you're fully alert at the wheel. You just don't know what pedestrians are going to do, right? You don't know what's going to happen.
Sure.
And, obviously, at the end of the day, we're all human, and it naturally can have an effect. The team as a whole, do you think it's one of these opportunities to really kind of rally around him? I guess that's kind of stating the obvious, but does it give them an extra jolt maybe, if anything, going forward here into the rest of the season and beyond?
I don't know if that necessarily does that. I mean, I think being cleared of any wrongdoing probably really kind of ends the whole situation. I think it's got probably has more to do with the players being able to get back to focusing on basketball more than anything else. I don't necessarily know that or think that that's going to cause them to come up with, let's win it for coach or anything like that. I mean, it could, it could certainly galvanize that team, but, in a situation like that, getting back to basketball is probably the best thing you can hope for. I mean, if you look, switching sports for a second, if you look, back to 2001, following the September 11th attacks, there was nothing that was better for the people of the city of New York than the resumption of the baseball season and to have the Yankees make their march through the playoffs. So it was all about the return to normalcy, though, I think, more than anything else. And so maybe that'll be the case here for the Orangemen.
From one coach to the other, let's talk about Roy Williams for a second. His bout with vertigo here recently, dropping to his knee in the middle of a game. Again, another coach who's getting up there in age. Williams is 68. We know Boeheim's a little bit older, but these are two guys who've been around, obviously, a long, long time. And if nothing less, I think it gives us an opportunity to talk about Roy and how I always regard him. I'm curious to get your take on this one, but I've really regarded him for a long time as one of the most underrated college coaches maybe ever. He's been ultra successful since going to North Carolina, transitioning from Kansas to North Carolina in 2003. We know 3 national championships to boot. And it's just one of those guys who looks like, for the most part, he, at least as of late, he wasn't going to slow down anytime soon. Maybe now things change. What's your view on everything that's gone on with him recently?
Well, I think you're right as far as being one of the underrated coaches of all time. He's done a fantastic job with the Tar Heels, especially living in the shadow there of Dean Smith. It's hard for anybody to follow a legend. And granted, he didn't necessarily follow Smith directly, but when you have a guy like Dean Smith who had the kind of success he did, it's hard to have lightning strike twice, and to win 3 national championships at North Carolina after taking over, and making the move from Kansas, was certainly tough. I think it's a testament to his coaching and recruiting ability. And all you have to do is compare North Carolina to UCLA in this situation. UCLA won 10 national championships under John Wooden, and since Coach Wooden retired in the mid '70s, UCLA's won 1 back in the '90s. That's it. Nobody else has won has won a national championship at UCLA besides the one that Jim Harrick won for the Bruins. And so it's something where to be able to win 3 titles after North Carolina's legendary coach retired and eventually passed away, I think is a testament to Williams. What happens in the future? Who knows? Nobody knows what the future holds. It's something where there's life is full of surprises. Sometimes guys just turn around and say, that's it, I'm done, and life moves on. Williams may decide to do that. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Do you think there maybe is some sort of unofficial competition between a lot of these older coaches, Boeheim, Roy Williams, Coach K at Duke, and others, to maybe who can adapt the best to the younger players of today? Who can adapt their coaching style the best that really suits and caters to these younger players, such as the Zion Williamsons of the world and guys who have really fallen into the one-and-done category? Do you think there's something there, maybe unofficially? It's not something that's talked about a whole lot, but we see guys who are able to evolve, the coaches who have done that. They've been successful. Obviously, others who haven't, they've kind of gone by the wayside. Do you think there's something there?
Well, I think on one hand, guys really are more just going out there trying to win. Because that's the bottom line. That's what coaches are paid to do. They're paid to win games. But at the same time, there's an old saying in business: change and adapt or die. And I think that coaching, that certainly applies to coaching as well as business. And I think coaches are forced to adapt. Coaches are forced to adapt to the whole one and done scenario. I really wish that the NBA could get their act together and just end the whole one and done scenario. Make it more like college baseball, where if you decide you get a shot to go pro right out of high school, and if you decide to go to college, you're there for at least 3 years. And that would solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing now as far as the whole one and dones go. And,
well, it looks like we're getting close.
More rational.
Yeah, it looks like we're getting close.
It would certainly be a good thing.
Yeah, I'm in favor. I've said this a long time. I'm in favor of them doing away with the one and done. Look, if guys want to go to the NBA, if they want to play professional basketball right out of high school, they should have the opportunity to do so, or at least be put on the path to do so, a la a G League type of path, in which they're starting to formulate here recently. Silver's talked about that from the NBA commissioner's perspective, and I think the path is really being laid for that to come in the coming years here coming up. But it just doesn't make sense to me why, if a guy knows he wants to go play professional basketball right out of high school, he shouldn't go to college and be one and done, when really we know college it's all about building chemistry and trying to have guys stick together for a couple of years to have ultimately a shot of potentially winning a championship down the line towards the end of their careers in college. So I'm in favor of them doing away with the one and done. Maybe one of the more unexplained phenomenons here recently in sports is the Nike shoe explosion, Joe. Of course, that occurring with Zion Williamson of Duke. And this really has kind of branched out into a whole bunch of different talking points. And one, you can talk about, obviously, how Zion is just a freak of nature, and this guy's unbelievable, could potentially be the next LeBron. You can also talk about the one-and-done situation, like we had mentioned before, and all that has to offer with that one. But what I want to get your take on here to begin with is there's talk now that Zion maybe will not play the rest of the season, or he'll just, kind of rein it back a bit because he wants to preserve his body for the NBA draft. What are your thoughts on guys really trying to save themselves and preserve their body when really, in reality, they kind of have a commitment to their team, don't they, to kind of finish out the year?
They most certainly do, and if a guy's physically able to play, the fact is that he should be playing. If he's a one and done, he should already have himself an insurance policy in the event that he gets hurt. So if Zion is able to go, maybe Coach K holds him out of the ACC tournament, and it keeps him back just for the NCAA tournament. I don't know. That's something for Duke to figure out. But it's something where if you're on my team, and you're physically able to play, get out there on the court and play. That's the way I look at it. If you're not going to be, you're not willing or able to play, then get the hell off my bench. And if that hurts the team, that hurts the team. But I don't want somebody there who doesn't want to be there. And so, if he doesn't want to be there, then turn in your equipment and get out. And that's part of the problem with the one and dones, is that at the start of the season that they're only going to be there for a year, and it's kind of ridiculous. It really is.
If they paid players to be there, I'm thinking they would want to finish out the year, and there wouldn't even be any whispers about them not giving 100% if they can do so and to complete out the rest of the season. Where do you stand on the potential, if there is any potential in the future, of college athletes ever being paid?
Let's face it, they need to be paid. I mean, it's ridiculous that the NCAA makes all this television money from CBS and TNT and ESPN, and the only people getting paid are the folks at the NCAA and possibly and the schools themselves. It's nowhere else. I mean, it almost. Well, I'm not going to go there, but it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, let's just say that Josh Rosen got it right when he talked about players needing to be paid, they deserve something. I don't know what the exact right amount is, but the fact of the matter is that if a school's making a ton of money on the labor of a player, they should be able to see some of that. Now they shouldn't see millions upon millions of dollars at the college level, but they should see something, and they may have to wait till after they leave school to collect on it. But the fact is that they need to see some of that money, and the same goes for both basketball and football players, because the whole amateur idea at this point, I think, has been proven pretty ridiculous.
Last one on basketball before we talk a little college football here, Joe. With the NCAA tournament coming up, obviously, March Madness, people love it. It's one of the best tournaments in sports. I think it is the best tournament in all of sports. The way it's laid out, how they have increased the number of teams in recent years, the way that the Turner Networks and CBS broadcast it nationally to everybody, how you can choose which games you want to watch. I think it's awesome. If there is anything, though, that they could have really kind of improve upon, I guess you could say, going forward, would there be anything that Joe Piechowski would like to see them do different?
Yeah, and get rid of the whole first four idea. I mean, it's a pretty poorly implemented concept. If a team is a 10th, 7th seed or a 10th seed, well, then if you don't have another 7th seed to give them, then you make them an 8. You don't make them force them to play in to the 7th seed. I mean, that's pretty basic. I mean, part of the problem is that they've got so many darn automatic bids that it some of the at-large. It reduces the number of at-large bids out there. But I don't like the whole 68-team field. I think they should go back to a 64-team field and call it good, or expand it out to the next level where almost everybody gets to play.
Which means that the regular season would mean even less than it does now.
Even less, yeah. I mean, you turn around and you add another round of I guess would be like 16 or 30, probably be more like
There was talk at one point a couple years ago.
I'm not doing the math right.
Yeah, I got you. There was talk that maybe they would increase it to like 96. There was a really high number thrown out there at one point.
Yeah, I mean, you could expand it to 96 and give 32 teams a first round bye, and do it that way. That's what I was saying. I mean, you expand it to a point where it's almost kind of ridiculous. But the whole first four where you've got two teams fighting for a number 7 seed or a number 10 seed is just stupid. It really truly is, because you're telling me that this team is a number 10 seed in whatever region they're going to if they win the first 4 games. So you're telling me that they deserve a higher seed than the 16 seed in that region, but you're forcing the 10 seed to play in and not the 16 seed. It's just ridiculous.
Are we going to see another 16 beat a 1?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it may be a while. How long did it take for a 16 seed to beat a 1? I mean, we're talking, quite a while there, at least in terms of the modern era of the tournament.
How great was that though last year? How much fun was that watching that team?
Oh, it was a blast. It was a blast. I mean, everybody loved Maryland, Baltimore County, for beating the number 1 seed there. That was fantastic. And I think that's good for college basketball, because it shows that on any given day anything can happen, and just because you're a 16 seed, doesn't automatically mean that you've got no shot in the tournament. And
everyone's got an opportunity.
That's why it's March Madness.
It's a beautiful thing, and I really thought about it recently. And there is no other sport that I can think of in which everyone gets involved in filling out a bracket the way March Madness in college basketball is set up. I mean, even if you don't watch college basketball at all, everyone just about knows somebody that will still fill out a bracket or at least participate. I can't think of any other sport or contest that really brings people together the way March Madness does now.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's not very time consuming, unless you want it to be. You could sit there and watch college basketball all day long, 4 days out of the week, and have a lot of fun watching it. But you can also just pick and choose what you want to watch, and usually you get a pretty good idea though after the first weekend as far as where you stand. And I think it's a tremendous amount of fun, which is why everybody puts together either the office pools where you're kicking in $5 or $10, or you're just doing it online, for fun. It's just fun to do. Obviously, you don't want anybody who's in a position with a college or university to be participating in that. I think simply because that's going to cost people their jobs, as it did with former UCLA football coach Rick Neuheisel when he was at Washington. But it's just a lot of fun. Everybody enjoys it, and it's what's made the game great. It's what's made the tournament great.
Let's segue quickly to UCLA football. Spring practice getting underway here. Chip Kelly, year number 2 for him, and it looks like things are meshing together well right now. There's not a whole lot of talk out of Westwood with the football team right now, which probably isn't a bad thing, no? I mean, you want it to be obviously the nose to the grindstone, getting really off to a good foot here to start the spring practice.
Well, spring practice only started on Tuesday, and I was out there watching Tuesday's practice, and it was a typical first practice. Guys, quarterbacks were a little rusty. Their throws weren't the best. They had their flashes, where they completed quite a few passes in a row, but at the same time, there were times when their accuracy wasn't there yet. And that's just the way the first practice goes. It was shirts and shorts. It was they weren't in full pads. They're just kind of getting back in the swing of things. And so what's going to happen here over the course of the next 2 months, because they do put a 2-week break, a 2 or 3 week break into the middle of spring practice at UCLA due to winter quarterfinals, and as well as spring break. But over the course of the next 5 weeks of spring practice, not including the 2-week break, so you're looking at about 7 or 8 weeks total. They're gonna get better and better each day. Interestingly, Chip Kelly is calling it spring training, which kind of goes back to what he referred to UCLA's practice sessions as all of last fall. He'd always called them training, because I think it kind of goes to the whole concept that practice is it's the connotation between the word practice and the connotation behind the word training. Training has a little bit more purpose behind it. The purpose being improvement, as opposed to just practice. Practice kind of tends to be more like going through the motions, I guess. And so he's deliberately calling it spring training as opposed to spring practice. But it was a reasonably good first day. The weather was good a couple days ago.
Yeah, the rain has finally stopped here, knock on wood, in Los Angeles. I was about to build an ark and kind of invite people on it who wanted to stay dry. It's been absolutely crazy. But yeah, I'm sure it's huge to have some dry conditions here, just to get out there. No one likes to start off beginning of spring practice or spring training, as Chip's calling it, and just have a rain out. No one is really in favor of that.
No, and hopefully the weather will hold up through the weekend, because they're back on the field again. They had the second session this morning, and then they're back on the field again on Saturday morning at 8:00. We've got the complete schedule for anybody that's interested. We've got that posted at BruinsNation.com. I fully encourage anybody that wants to find out about the Bruins to go on out and actually watch practice, or training as it is, because it's just a fun way to go out there and catch what's going on with the program, see who's new, see what's going on. UCLA's got a new quarterback that's come in. His name is Chase Griffin. I'm kind of excited to see him. He was the Texas Gatorade Player of the Year. I was kind of hoping that he'll actually challenge Dorian Thompson-Robinson for the starting spot, but after watching the first practice, I'm not so sure anymore. he's not quite as tall as he was billed to be. He looked to be significantly shorter than Robinson. He was listed at 5'11", but I think that was a little exaggeration as far as that's concerned. But he also didn't do a whole lot of throwing on Tuesday. So there was speculation. Ben Bolch from the LA Times was speculating that maybe he had suffered some sort of an injury during practice, and that's why he wasn't throwing as much, because he had thrown at the beginning of practice, and all of a sudden for the bulk of practice he wasn't throwing at all, and nobody really quite knew why. And Chip Kelly wasn't scheduled to meet with the media until this morning, so we'll find out here later on today what's going on with Griffin. But you've got other guys that a lot of folks are excited to see. Guys like Keegan Jones. He was the state champion 100-meter sprinter in the state of Tennessee. He was originally committed to the Naval Academy, and he flipped over to UCLA right before the start of fall camp last year. So you've got a couple of the new guys already there at spring training, and we'll see what kind of an impact they can have on the team. The team, needs to keep growing and keep building. There were guys who were missing, who it looks like will not be on the team anymore. It looks like defensive lineman Rick Wade is going to have neck surgery, and so looks like he's going to end up taking a medical retirement. You've got guys like B.K. Juarez, who's kind of had an up and down career at UCLA, and it looks like he may no longer be on the team as well. But there's been no confirmation of that from Chip Kelly as of yet. So hopefully he addressed some of that this morning when he met with the media. But we'll have to wait and see.
You can follow him on Twitter, of course, at Joe Piechowski, managing editor at BruinsNation.com. Joe, this was a lot of fun, man. Thanks for calling in today and really getting caught up in everything that's going on, from the basketball team to the football team and everything in between. It's an exciting time. I feel like we talk about that all the time in sports, but here in March and in the spring, there's a lot to check out.
I got to tell you, Brad, there's one more important thing going on at UCLA. UCLA gymnastics. You don't think that, it's not one of the two big sports, but I got to tell you, the UCLA gymnastics team, they're ranked number 2 in the country. There's no sport on the UCLA campus right now that's more exciting than the gymnasts. Ms. Val's in her final season as a head coach. They've got 2 home meets left. There's one this Saturday against Stanford. The following Saturday is the final home meet of the season against Utah State. And then they're going to go marching on, trying to go back to back on national titles. So if somebody really wants to go out and have a good time and watch some athletes compete, I fully suggest that they check out the UCLA gymnastics team, because they've had a very, very good season so far.
I'm going to be honest.
So that's one other thing to go for.
I'm most dialed into the gymnastics scene when the Olympics are going on, probably the case for most people, but I do love to hear when you have just dynamite squads, like it sounds like the gymnastics team at UCLA, the way they're playing right now is just killing it. It's great. Champs.
They've done a fantastic job all season.
That's awesome.
You can also catch them on Pac-12 networks as well, so can't recommend that enough.
Joe Piechowski. Hey, Joe, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for the time,
Alrighty.
and we'll talk to you next time down the road.
Sounds great, Brad. Thanks.